This is Edmund Burke's A Vindication of Natural Society, or a view of the miseries and evils arising to mankind from every species of artificial society. In a letter to Lord by a late noble writer, dated 1756. The Preface. Before the philosophical works of Lord Bolingbroke had appeared, great things were expected from the leisure of a man who, from the splendid scene of action in which his talents had enabled him to make so conspicuous a figure, had retired to employ those talents in the investigation of truth. Philosophy began to congratulate herself upon such a proselyte from the world of business, and hoped to have extended her power under the auspices of such a leader. In the midst of these pleasing expectations, the works themselves at last appeared in full body, and with great pomp. Those who searched in them for new discoveries in the mysteries of nature, those who expected something which might explain or direct the operations of the mind, those who hoped to see morality illustrated and enforced, those who looked for new helps to society and government, those who desired to see the characters and passions of mankind delineated. In short, all who consider such things as philosophy, and require some of them at least in every philosophical work, all these were certainly disappointed. They found the landmarks of science precisely in their former places, and they thought they received but a poor recompense for this disappointment in seeing every mode of religion attacked in a lively manner, and the foundation of every virtue and of all government sapped with great art and much ingenuity. What advantage do we derive from such writings? What delight can a man find in employing a capacity which might be usefully exerted for the noblest purposes, in a sort of sullen labor, in which, if the author could succeed, he is obliged to own that nothing could be more fatal to mankind than his success? I cannot conceive how this sort of writers propose to compass the designs they pretend to have in view, by the instruments which they employ. Do they pretend to exalt the mind of man, by proving him no better than a beast? Do they think to enforce the practice of virtue, by denying that vice and virtue are distinguished by good or ill fortune here, or by happiness or misery hereafter? Do they imagine they shall increase our piety and our reliance on God by exploding his providence and insisting that he is neither just nor good? Such are the doctrines which, sometimes concealed, sometimes openly and fully avowed, are found to prevail throughout the writings of Lord Bolingbroke. And such are the reasonings which this noble writer and several others have been pleased to dignify with the name of philosophy. If these are delivered in a specious manner, and in a style above the common, they cannot want a number of admirers of as much docility as can be wished for in disciples. To these the editor of the following little piece has addressed it. There is no reason to conceal the design of it any longer. The design was to show that, without the exertion of any considerable forces, the same engines which were employed for the destruction of religion might be employed with equal success for the subversion of government, and that specious arguments might be used against those things which they, who doubt of everything else, will never permit to be questioned. It is an observation which I think Socrates makes in one of his orations against the Sophists, that it is far more easy to maintain a wrong cause and to support paradoxical opinions to the satisfaction of a common auditory than to establish a doubtful truth by solid and conclusive arguments. When men find that something can be said in favor of what, on the very proposal, they have thought utterly indefensible, they grow doubtful of their own reason. They are thrown into a sort of pleasing surprise. They run along with the speaker, charmed and captivated to find such a plentiful harvest of reasoning, where all seemed barren and unpromising. This is the fairyland of philosophy, and it very frequently happens that those pleasing impressions on the imagination subsist and produce their effect, even after the understanding has been satisfied of their unsubstantial nature. There is a sort of gloss upon ingenious falsehoods that dazzles the imagination, but which neither belongs to nor becomes the sober aspect of truth. I have met with a quotation in Lord Coke's reports that pleased me very much, though I do not know from whence he has taken it. Interdum fucata falsitas, says he, in multis est probabilior et sep rationibus vincent nudam veritatem. In such cases, the writer has a certain fire and alacrity inspired into him by a consciousness that, let it fare how it will with the subject, his ingenuity will be sure of applause. And this alacrity becomes much greater if he acts upon the offensive by the impetuosity that always accompanies an attack, and the unfortunate propensity which mankind have to the finding and exaggerating faults. The editor is satisfied that a mind which has no restraint from a sense of its own weakness, of its subordinate rank in the creation, and of the extreme danger of letting the imagination loose upon some subjects, may very plausibly attack everything the most excellent and venerable, that it would not be difficult to criticize the creation itself, and that if we were to examine the divine fabrics by our ideas of reason and fitness, and to use the same method of attack by which some men have assaulted revealed religion, we might, with as good color and with the same success, make the wisdom and power of God in his creation appear to many no better than foolishness. There is an air of plausibility which accompanies vulgar reasonings and notions, taken from the beaten circle of ordinary experience, that is admirably suited to the narrow capacities of some and to the laziness of others. But this advantage is in a great measure lost when a painful, comprehensive survey of a very complicated matter, and which requires a great variety of considerations, is to be made, when we must seek in a profound subject not only for arguments, but for new materials of argument, their measures and their method of arrangement, when we must go out of the sphere of our ordinary ideas, and when we can never walk surely but by being sensible of our blindness. And this we must do, or we do nothing, whenever we examine the result of a reason which is not our own, even in matters which are, as it were, just within our reach. What would become of the world if the practice of all moral duties and the foundations of society rested upon having their reasons made clear and demonstrative to every individual? The editor knows that the subject of this letter is not so fully handled as obviously it might. It was not his design to say all that could possibly be said. It had been inexcusable to fill a large volume with the abuse of reason, nor would such an abuse have been tolerable, even for a few pages, if some underplot of more consequence than the apparent design had not been carried on. Some persons have thought that the advantages of the state of nature ought to have been more fully displayed. This had undoubtedly been a very ample subject for declamation, but they do not consider the character of the piece. The writers against religion, whilst they oppose every system, are wisely careful never to set up any of their own. If some inaccuracies in calculation, in reasoning, or in method be found, perhaps these will not be looked upon as faults by the admirers of Lord Bolingbroke, who will, the editor is afraid, observe much more of his lordship's character in such particulars of the following letter than they are likely to find of that rapid torrent of an impetuous and overbearing eloquence and the variety of rich imagery for which that writer is justly admired.